we needed a weekend to digest this LeBron James news because we were reacting to it real time.
Yeah.
And I think looking back, I would characterize our reactions as measured, but I know this sounds oxymoronic, measured, but also a little bit frenetic. We just heard the news, and we were all shocked. I mean, there wasn't a panelist that was sitting here that wasn't shocked that it was Philadelphia, who was widely considered to be the fourth choice out of the four popular choices, with Cleveland, Golden State, Miami being the losers in the LeBron sweepstakes. We had some time to gather our thoughts, to measure our thoughts. Jay, you were here Friday, so I'll start with you and then move to Zach. But has it changed any for you that you had time to think about it and marinate on it a little bit?
Not really.
No?
I'm kind of the same place where I was Friday.
Still shocked?
Shocked. I was surprised then on set. I was still surprised now. I don't think, like, there seemed to be this feeling over the weekend like he screwed Cleveland over. I don't think he did anything wrong. And I am a little bit surprised, and I've said this on the show. I thought if it wasn't going to be Cleveland that they would have gotten that messaging out, and they didn't.
So meaning that they didn't know either.
Well, either they didn't know or they didn't care. I don't know. Like, you can say whatever you want now. It's over.
Sure.
Like, you could say, oh, the Cavs were second, or oh, the Cavs were never. Like, it doesn't matter. If you don't win, it doesn't matter where you finish. Like,
sure.
So they can come out now and say anything, and people will believe it or not believe it or whatever. So I did think, and I tend to think, Cavs were in it up until the end, because I do believe that they would have got that messaging out if it wasn't them. So I'm a little bit surprised that it went that way, that there was no indication that it wasn't going to be Cleveland, just because the way 2010 went and everything. But in the grand scheme of things, he doesn't owe Cleveland anything. No. He delivered the title in 2016. We're square. Yep. We're good. We're good on both sides. So people are upset and aggravated and say, like, well, they'll boo him when he comes back. All right, fine. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, that's their right.
Yeah, but I personally, I don't think he did anything wrong.
Yeah.
At the risk of going on for 4 hours,
Yeah.
I got very little that I could nitpick LeBron's whole career, right?
Yeah.
And his whole life, which has been lived under this crazy microscope as social media
Decision
exploded.
one was probably it, right?
Yeah. In the time that social media exploded, as a guy who was home and then gone and then back home and all of these things, I think when we've heard LeBron talk about legacy, and you don't pick your own legacy.
No.
He's now some of that is just in the spotlight. So I just thought it was the perfect ending would be for him to come home.
Yeah.
And I think he did handle it wrong. So I'm probably a little short of shocked with the whole deal.
Handle it wrong how?
By letting, I believe he led Cleveland people.
Oh, do you?
I believe he led everybody on.
But he really never said a word.
No, but
the only word he said was
sure. I'll say this, Jeff.
process.
I thought it was very smart of them to adapt. Look, LeBron's going to write a letter. It's going to be heartfelt. It was clearly his words, or at least most of them. Right.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen that on July 2nd, and maybe
that's fair.
That's my.
I believe that criticism is fair.
Yeah. That's kind of my nitpick. So, yeah, I didn't ever think he was going to Miami. I thought it was going to be Cleveland. I thought maybe Golden State, maybe Philly. And Philly made the right basketball moves to set it up, and the other teams didn't.
And that's ultimately what decided it, correct?
That's the way we have to look at it right now.
So, Jay, I have a question for you, because in talking to folks Friday, Saturday, yesterday, I feel like I think there is an element of what you're talking about, that fans are upset, left us at the altar again. He flirted with Cleveland, and I couldn't find anything where LeBron himself came out and even mentioned Cleveland. Now, maybe I'm missing something.
No, he did. But it was all the messaging through Rich about the 4 finalists and about these are the teams, and Rich on his podcast and the whiteboard and going through all the different.
Right, but was that
machinations.
LeBron driven, or was that just Rich being Rich?
Well, no, to your point, LeBron never came out and said anything.
No.
But I think,
and I couldn't find anything where he did.
And right or wrong, fair or not, you are assuming, I mean, Rich is his agent. Rich is speaking on behalf of LeBron.
You would think so, yes. You would think that would be the case. I heard a lot of folks, it started midday Friday, I think, when people had time to really sort of think about what happened.
Yeah.
I started to hear a prevailing trend emerge, and that was, I'm good with LeBron. Like, I don't blame LeBron. And I started hearing a lot of folks saying, it's on the Cavs. The Cavs said, we like our team as is. We don't need any other horses. If we get LeBron, that's our horse.
Yeah.
And in the end, that strategy might have done them in, because Philly saw Jaylen Brown, he saw Jaylen Brown go to Philly, and suddenly he was, it's okay, that's where I want to go.
Yeah.
Should Cleveland have been, and should they take criticism for this, Should they have been more proactive in trying to lure a generational player and perhaps another run at an NBA championship? Do they have any blame to this at all?
So I wrote this over the weekend for The Athletic, and I think this is very nuanced and a bit complicated because everything with LeBron is nuance and complication.
It is.
I don't think that you tear apart your roster to appease a 41-year-old. I don't believe that. I do believe that they probably should have looked a second time at Jaylen Brown, not so much because, hey, it might get us LeBron, but hey, I think we need Jaylen Brown.
Sure.
And so I think that's the piece. I mean, we're 2 months into free agency. We're 2 months out from Dan Gilbert tweeting, we're nowhere near where we need to be. And it's the end of July, and it's basically the same roster.
And what are you going to do now?
Right. And so that's the piece of this. Like, there's other tentacles to this, and the Darius thing, we get into that. And we talked about it throughout this whole process. I'm like, guys, I don't know that I'm going to bring AD in here to appease LeBron. If you think AD can help you and help your team, that's a different conversation.
Sure.
There was a time where you would tear apart your roster to do whatever LeBron wanted to try and get him back. Those days are over. And perfect example, 2014, they traded guys off the roster to create cap space without any confirmation LeBron was coming.
Right.
But they had to get to max space to get themselves in the conversation, and they did that. So they started gutting the roster and moving on from guys that had helped them. But we aren't at that point
So
anymore.
you're saying in 2014, you can do that because it's the GOAT peak.
He's in the prime.
But in 2026, 12 years later, the Cavs, in your mind, did the right thing.
Well, again, you guys know I've defended Evan Mobley
You have.
to the mat over and over and over. There's one player that you guys have brought to me that I said I would trade him for, and it was Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
And I understand Boston traded him for pennies on the dollar, and Philly got a steal. And I had this conversation with Joe over the week, Joe Varden. Joe's like, well, why should the Cavs give all that up for him? No one else did. I'm like, well, sometimes you need to be the one to give that up. So so I just think Jaylen puts him in a different conversation. And then if you have Jaylen, maybe the Darius component of this, I don't think that's entirely fair either. Like, I think there's some disingenuous going on here with some of that.
Could not agree more on that point, by the way.
Because you want to
Could
do
not
that.
agree with Jason.
You want to do that an hour later.
No,
like, we're kind of going all over the place.
Get into
Yeah. So basically, because I'm coming to Zach with this next. You're not absolving the Cavs. You're just saying it's a different player to rebuild your roster for, and you don't blame them for not trying to do more.
I'm saying it's July 27th. Your owner told you 2 months ago we're nowhere near where we need to be. The rest of the East is improving, and you have not.
Okay. Yeah. So I sense that there is some blame.
Yeah,
I feel they should have done more. So that. Because I believe that's the way the wind's blowing right now amongst fans.
It's not just more to bring LeBron back. He's 41.
To improve the team.
And I've told you, he's not the same guy that left. Like, he doesn't defend. He doesn't feel like he'd be great to have on the floor, but he doesn't help you defensively.
And the game is different too. It's so up and down. And
So
he's not built that way.
So I know it's like splitting hairs here, but I do think that there needed to be a little bit more action over these last couple of months.
Right.
But it's not necessarily just to try and lure back a 41-year-old who's got 1 or 2 years left. You're just trying to stay in the game in the East.
I think, though, that carrot would draw in, it would serve two purposes. One, if you get him, or if you don't get him, you still improved your team. But by improving your team, you improve your chances to get him, and Philly proved that true. Is Cleveland, do they have any culpability here in not doing more to recruit LeBron James?
They do. I believe this is absolutely a failure by the Cavs on some level. Now, were they ever going to move heaven and earth? Did they always have a bunch of options? No. But I think the way to look at it, he mentioned the name Evan Mobley. This is a double and triple down on Evan Mobley. They weren't willing to give him up for Jaylen Brown or get involved in anything else that may have been pie in the sky. So you hear these Anthony Davis things, and then it resurfaces 2 days before the decision's made. Right? But the Cavs decided to stick with Evan Mobley, and they got beat on other fronts. The Sixers went and got Jaylen Brown. It shocked everybody. It ended up being the bridge piece that they got that the Cavs didn't get.
Yeah, I don't want to say it flip-flop, but as the day went on Friday, I wasn't angry at LeBron. Look, I get the pro sport. It's a business. I totally understand that. I also don't begrudge him for trying to. What he's trying to do is, can you say the player doesn't write their own legacy? They don't, but they can kind of choose which piece of paper it's written on.
Sure.
And I think that's what he did here. The words are yet to be filled in, but the paper is Philadelphia, not Cleveland. And the one thing I think this gives LeBron a legitimate chance to do, and we touched on this Friday, both here and upstairs, if he's able to pull this off, then he enhances his legacy, in my mind, substantially. And in the argument against Michael Jordan. I'm not saying that would put him over the top. I just think it gives another log to the motivational fire of all of those that are in the LeBron GOAT camp, because he would have done not just what Michael never did in doing it with 3 teams, he would have done it with 4 completely different teams. And to be able to do that at 42, and I don't know that he'd be the center cog in that wheel. I don't think he has to be. I think if he wins the championship, the narrative becomes LeBron did it.
Yeah.
Not that Philly did it. It would be that LeBron did it. And, 5 might be greater than 6 in that instance. So I do think that he chose where to write the final chapter of his legacy. It wasn't the storybook ending that everybody in Cleveland had hoped for. I thought that, hey, if he came back and won it in Cleveland, it might as well have been Philly, because it's a completely different team than he won it with when he was here in 2016. So I was never angry at LeBron. I just was like, God, he had it right here. It was it. But as I started thinking more about it, I started joining that camp too. Cavs did nothing. When your owner publicly, and this is an owner who once upon a time lived in the public space and then withdrew from that public space after a grave illness, and now almost never goes in that public space.
Correct.
And he went there and he chose to, I think strategically, I don't say much, but when I say something now, it has great weight to it. When he says, we are a long ways out and you kind of do nothing, and the guy that got away goes to Philly and Gansey and brings in Brown and LeBron, if I'm Dan, I don't know how he isn't thinking this. Oh my God, I bet on the wrong pony. I bet on, and I mean, I'm talking about
I know
Kobe.
who you're talking about.
And I think all of those are legitimate points, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of those. I just think that, I'm not saying Gansey could have pulled that off here, but I think he would have had a legitimate chance to do it here, and what a splash he would have made. And now Dan's stuck with Kobe, and I don't think this is going to end well.
I agree. I came in believing this conversation would mostly be about sentiment and delivery and all of those things, but I think it quickly and rightly flips back to this is a failure of the Cavs. They came in, we know they didn't have a bunch of options. We know they're not in this terrible spot that it feels like, right?
Yeah.
They just made the NBA's Final Four, but they were either going to make a crazy move and move off Mobley or Allen, or they were going to get LeBron. And right now it's still July, but they've done neither. And LeBron is at another Eastern Conference team with a former employee of yours.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for Kobe.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. There's a lot of pressure on this Cavs team going into the season now. And, I wrote this over the weekend, they've inadvertently set Mobley up to be this polarizing figure now, because every bad
It's on
game,
him now.
every bad game he has, people are going to go, could have had Jaylen Brown and LeBron.
You kept him.
Could have had Giannis. Now look
Yeah.
what you got. And that's not fair to him, because he's a really good player. He's a really good player.
I know, but Jay,
But I get how this goes. I know.
we've arced him into being the player.
I know.
And so for me, I do agree with you. I think that this puts a ton of pressure on Evan Mobley. And you know what? I'm okay with that. We know pressure makes diamonds or breaks pipes, one or the other.
Yeah.
And we've watched him incrementally improve. Just, a little bit here, little bit there. He tried to add the outside shot. He's tried to do things to put himself into that stratosphere that we all think he should be in. But you're right. This is a double down on Evan Mobley, and all eyes are on Evan now.
Yeah.
Every single Cavs fan, when they watch every game, he will now be, well, he's no LeBron, Jaylen Brown combo, and how can he be?
Right.
It's almost unfair to him.
It is unfair to him. He's a tremendous talent. He's an excellent player, but the stakes just got ratcheted up on him.
Big time.
Through no doing of his own.
No.
Through no fault of his
Now,
own whatsoever.
to the breaks pipes or makes diamonds, my hope is he's still a young player.
Yeah.
My hope is that he's watching all this. He's smart. He knows what's going on. He knows that the Cavs planted their flag in the Evan Mobley camp.
Yeah.
My hope is that he reemerges in October and he's added 15 pounds of muscle and 5 low post moves and is a better spot-up shooter. I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it does. Mike, you got to weigh in on this because we covered a lot of ground, so go wherever you think you need to go.
Couldn't agree more with Mobley. I think we're going to dive a little more into that tomorrow in terms of how can he handle the pressure. But I saw a lot of the instant reaction to this whole LeBron choosing Philly as, well, the Cavs put all their eggs in the LeBron basket. That was the wrong decision. And I think what Jason said and what Zach said and what you said about the Cavs deserve some blame because they came into this offseason on the heels of being swept with the Dan Gilbert tweet. And on July 27th, they have a roster that looks almost identical to the roster that did not compete with the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Mario Hezonja is their only offseason addition that wasn't already on the roster. We'll talk about him and some other Plan B alternatives in the next hour of the show. But I also can't sit here and say I blame the Cavs for putting all the eggs in the LeBron basket when free agency started. If they decided they weren't trading Mobley for Jaylen Brown, which I said at the time I disagreed with, I would have made that deal. I have more Evan Mobley stock than anyone on this show, maybe anyone in Cleveland, and even I.
Jay's got a lot.
Even I would have flipped Mobley for Jaylen Brown if that deal was on the table, because not only is Brown still in their control for 3 more years, he plays the wing position. The Cavs haven't had a legitimate wing since LeBron left to LA back following the 2018 season. But when you look at the other options in free agency, the other potential targets the Cavs could assign, whether it's Kuminga, whether it's DeRozan, we'll talk about those other options later. They pale in comparison to LeBron. So for the Cavs as an organization to decide we're putting all our eggs in that basket and we're willing to basically lose the offseason up until this point if he chooses somewhere else, we know that's the consequence. It's incredibly risky, but I also don't know if they had signed Kuminga and taken themselves out of the LeBron situation, anyone would feel better about it. You know what I mean? I get why they put all their eggs in the LeBron basket, but sometimes going all in has the worst possible outcome if you don't get the desired result.
I got one quick thought that we didn't mention. I think it makes it extra aggravating. He signed for the minimum.
Which is crazy.
Right? And so
It
he
is
signed for the minimum
Look how
and it
good
wasn't
that would
in
look
Cleveland.
here.
Right. So you didn't have a ton of flexibility ever.
Now,
But you still...
we weren't sure all the details in the contract. I think he has a player option after 1 year.
Is that
I
what it
read
is?
that Friday, but it
I
wasn't.
saw
I believe it's a one-on-one. And interesting, just want to mention this. There's a 15% trade kicker
Yeah.
in his contract, which just interesting. Could mean absolutely nothing.
Why would that be there?
It's fairly standard in a lot of contracts.
It is?
I'm more surprised he didn't have a no trade clause. Like I would if that's the path you're trying to go down, I would look at it more that I'm surprised he didn't get a no trade.
If things go wildly south in Philly,
And they could.
and they very well could, and where I'm going, Philly fans don't like to hear this talk, but Joel Embiid isn't Teflon. I mean, he could go down in Game 7, and 30 games in, this thing could be 11-19, and everyone's looking around like, what happened? There would be a potential for LeBron to ask for a trade or want to be moved, and then Philly could get assets for him. So that is still a possibility down the road, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems volatile, right? Like, they got Jaylen Brown, and that's the move of the offseason, but the Celtics pretty clearly wanted Jaylen Brown out of their building, like, by a certain day and time.
Yeah.
Immediately willing to trade it to their oldest, most hated rival. So, like, there's some toxicity there that could linger. And you're right. Joel Embiid, when he plays, he's awesome. But when does he play? And even in the playoffs, he got hurt.
The one stat that jumped out that I saw Friday was if you add up the Sixers starting 5, their usage rate is 144%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The league is not going to change the rules to add a second ball into play. Somebody is going to have to cave and cave a lot. If you just went across the board, each guy's usage rate, if you averaged it, would have to go down 9%. So I think this does have the potential to be powder keg-ish because someone's not going to be happy with that. I can't imagine that everybody's going to be like, yeah, I'm good with the ball in my hand 9% less than it normally is.
Well, LeBron deferred last year. He very clearly took a back
that was with
seat.
a lower usage rate for LeBron already.
Yeah, I'm just saying he has deferred recently in his career when he thought it was for the better of the team. I think he would have no problem doing that again. But it's a fair point. It is. It's worth watching. And I should correct myself. I should know this. He's not eligible for a no trade clause.
Not because
NBA has wonky rules.
Oh, okay.
And because he's joining a new team, he was not eligible.
So he couldn't have, even if he wanted one.
Yeah.
He couldn't. Okay.
Yeah.